by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
To highlighters. Thank you again for joining us. As always, we're having such a good time. We currently subjecting, really putting the helter-skelter story of Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry through the microscope and microfilter. Still pretty early on, walking through the Tate crime and relating it to the Hinman crime, talking a lot about Mary Bruner and some of these other players that had some motivations that weren't quite as obvious on the surface. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Casey, you got quite a bit to say about this. I like some of the depth of your understanding. You've brought some new ideas. What do you got for us here?
In the process of me doing research, I'm working on this stuff 8 hours a day, right? Writing this book. There's a lot of different rabbit holes I go down. Some are worthless, others are interesting. And I came across one this week that I have to share with you guys. Imagine a guy born in 1934 in a Midwestern state that gets abandoned by his parents, finds his way into Boys Town in Nebraska, basically goes through the foster system, the institutions. Finally, in the 60s, makes his way out to California, settles in Hollywood, where he gets himself a big bus, starts collecting a bunch of young people and starting his own commune in Hollywood. They're going up and down the state, picking up young people, saying, hey, why don't you join us? After catching, some heat, him and these young people move about 45 miles north of Hollywood to a remote area out in a canyon. And
not a canyon, you say?
And he's getting, laws coming down on him, finding out that there's some statutory SA going on at this commune. What? There's some other kind of rumblings about illegal activity, scams going on. Eventually the guy gets arrested, and in 2017 he passes away while in prison. Most of you guys would think that I was talking about Charles Manson.
I was going to say, did he have a beard at any point?
Yeah. I'm actually talking about a guy named Tony Alamo, or Alamo, which had a similar story, was promoted by the media as a cult member and televangelist. And this is a guy that claimed to be a record producer, says that he wrote one of the Beatles albums. You have another music connection, which is weird. He had a wife that was a big blonde bombshell, like a Tammy Faye Baker type character. They took credit for coming up with the idea of Jonestown. I mean, wild, bro. He eventually got arrested for some child brides in his community and some real nefarious stuff. But
pimping and pandering, if you will.
I thought it was interesting because in 1943, he found his way into Boys Town, and we know that Charlie was there in 49. I just wonder if those two, now Charlie was only there for 3 days, but I wonder if they crossed paths while they were in there.
Oh, hell no. Get off of that. Come on, man.
Also, this falls right in line with something Tom O'Neill might say.
Exactly.
Oh, this is a program, a brainwashing, a mind control.
And there had been spores left behind by the elder for the younger to pick up, much like Father Yod. All those different characters. Remember Father Yod?
Yep, Father Yod is the man. Yep.
What I love about Father Yod, if y'all read about him, he was good with the Rolls Royces. He was good with having a nice, sexy body and his beautiful girl making some money. But the other restaurants and was making bank off of that shit. But I always knew about him because my mother lived on Kauai for a long time, and he was known to have died right near where my mother lived because he was such a tripper. Like, Father, yeah,
The facilitator of Poon.
I'm just saying, the guy was not a pimper, not a panderer, just a facilitator, as so many of these gentlemen who are becoming unalived in our generation. This is not a new thing, people. This is not new. So Father Yod was such a tripper and was so into his long hair and beard and persona of wearing these holy robes and vestments that the goofy MFer would go skydiving. Kauai is gorgeous. There's a lot of air currents creating these beautiful solar pockets that will suspend you on a hang glider for a good deal of time. You can show off, and it's the most beautiful place in the world to do it. So it's a great location to hang glide. He's up there showing off. That's not enough for Father Yod. He couldn't just tuck into the little sleeping bag unit you're supposed to wear when you're flying like anybody else would do that's aerodynamic. No, man. Yod's got to have his holy vestments. So this guy is up there flying around having the time of his life. His god dang robes and vestments got all flapped around in the wings of his hang glider. And that's what killed him, was the vanity of having to wear these cool ass clothes. And he's up there having the time of his life. Could have lived this thing out forever because he wasn't in violation of any laws that anyone is aware of. He had a profitable operation.
Yep.
He was dealing with
Everybody was happy.
dealing with adult women and hadn't gotten violent. And the thing goes like, huh, and just, and as a dude who's seen somebody die in a
Was he
hang
lying there
glider
on the beach with a broken back for like 2 days?
because they couldn't get down to him, and he's like, what craziness, different times.
And to bring it back to the Manson stuff, one of his Father Yod's followers was Mark Ross.
Absolutely. And who brought us?
I don't know.
Well, probably he was around at the end, and like,
Oh yeah.
there was so much information. He spoke so much. He had the vest, he had the beard, he had the whole thing. He was quite a bit a part of the Hendrix films, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
And there was a lot of these, Johnny Come Laters, the Jenny Gentrys,
Yep.
The different hangers on who came about, the Mary Alonzos and people like that. I found that very interesting.
So this guy,
Back to
Tony Alamo, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s where this trend came out where it was jean jackets that were spray painted or with an airbrush or whatever. They had like a tiger, but then they were all bedazzled, right? And these were sold in like high-end retailers, Nordstrom's and stuff. A lot of celebrities had custom made ones. Michael Jackson wore one. Well, this guy, Tony Alamo's cult, he had children making these things with stencils, right? And child labor laws. Eventually he got busted because the IRS and the national employment people came down on him for basically slave labor on these
snorted.
kids,
It made me snort, dude.
Yeah.
Slave labor,
Yeah.
child labor.
They're making $500 jean jackets for these celebrities made by little like 8-year-olds.
So it's like pre-Ed Hardy obnoxious clothes.
Yeah.
Predating Ed Hardy, who also engaged in child slave labor.
Crazy, bro.
But was tasteful enough to do it legally in a different country. Go Ed Hardy. Oh my word. So that's how he got, because they always have to do something. If we're not having sex with the kids, let us at least exploit their labor.
And so when I was mentioning him having a group out in the wilderness, it was actually in the town of Agua Dulce, which at that time was known as Saugus. This is Canyon Country, Santa Clarita area.
Pre-Magic Mountain.
It's just interesting because this was back in '69. So when he got busted, they kind of referred to them as like a copy of the Manson family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah, the Saugus, I can't remember their mascot off the top of my head. But we used to play them in sports all the time. That was part of our deal. Man, what a bus ride. You want to, man.
I bet. That's what, how long? A couple hours?
It was a couple hours we'd have to come down there, and then they'd come up and see us. And I'd always try to tag along. We'd sometimes play Lake Isabella in different sports. That was another really isolated community. And with another Manson tie-in, of course.
Shout out Trona with the all dirt football field.
I'm saying we had that, but also Lake Isabella, the last recreational stop off of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca before their untimely checkouts from this plane of existence. Now we're back early in Helter Skelter. Now, what are your feelings about this whole Al Springer major testimony that he was giving to the LAPD, which kind of counterbalanced the very we killed these people out of love. Charlie is love. Charlie is my thoughts. I am Charlie as Charlie is me. We have those counterbalances that are being put out there pretty early. But then we have the brutality of Susan Atkins' simple statement, which was, no, man, we're going up to Melcher's house that he owned. He'd moved out, but it was his house. Tex and Linda knew the layout. So it implicated those two, right? Through dope dealing. And we're just going to go up there and kill them all and get what we can get. So sounds like murder was the agenda. Coming up financially or with drugs, which would also help.
A huge part of it.
And then everyone else's different motives on top of it.
What's interesting, last episode I referenced volume 91, Mary Brunner and Nancy Pittman's testimony in the penalty phase. Nancy Pittman actually refers to both the love of brother and the drug theory.
Absolutely.
She says that the night before, after Bobby called the ranch on Thursday night and Friday morning, they were talking about copycat. We got to do something to throw the cops off, to make them believe that it was somebody else other than Bobby that it was doing this. But then she also goes and says that Linda and Tex had their own thing. They got burned by a couple people up there at the Cielo house. And so it's just kind of interesting that both Nicholas Schreck and George Simpson's theories are validated in one court testimony by one person.
Because everyone were individuals having their own motives. And the thing that brought it all together was Charles Manson. And that's the thing he was guilty of, is being older, hearing all this shit. Because I fully believe in my heart of hearts, this was the female conspiracy. This was fucking Charlie's idea. Charlie would have never run an operation like this. It was a military operation run in a terrible fashion by some basically teenage or very early 20s girls. So we have adolescent females watching a bunch of TV, hanging around, doing whatever else it is they're doing. And it was a very unrealistic, silly conspiracy on one level. So then I think if we take the prison interviews of Charles Manson, some of which there's credence, some of which, but again, everything, there's always truths in everything. What does he say? It's like 84-ish. He's got the beard. It's like really nice then.
Yeah.
He's got the separated mustache and the gray's just coming in, and he's really working the beard in this good way in this one interview. He's got the prison blues, if I'm not incorrect. So he's there talking. He's like, well, man, I've got these girls and they want to do this thing. And I'm like, wow, the hell? I leave, man. You're going to send me back to jail. And he does this thing where he basically indicates when he does this finger gesture, it happens so much that he had a gesture to the girls, meaning this was you're going to send me back to jail sign. Wow.
Yep.
So 15 years later, he recalls, you're going to send me back to jail. So honestly, you guys,
Specifically, he said it to Susan. Look at what you did.
that's why your D team theory is absolutely correct, I think. Sorry to all the survivors who want to think that Charlie wasn't a military operational guy. Why wouldn't he be? That's the only way he could look out for you guys. You're going to make murderous, terrible, awful fucking decisions. All the dude was trying to do was mitigate it. You were going to do whatever the fuck it is you were going to do. And that's what he kept saying. Hey, man, I didn't tell anybody to do anything. They were going to do what they were going to do.
Yep.
He was just trying to mitigate it. Did he deserve the prison sentence? According to George Stimson, no. Am I inclined to agree with that? Yes. Do I want to implicate survivors and ruin their lives 50-something years later by instigating a law enforcement investigation? No. But do I think that's going to realistically happen? I mean, I really hope not, but no, I don't think it is. So in that vestment and in that logic of, I think something very obvious, you have someone like Sandra effing Good. She is in no way an individual I would take lightly. I don't care how she looks. I don't care how she's presented. She was the rhetorical and intellectual repository of a lot of the more militant, active, hands-on philosophies of what, people like to now philosophically. These people were just living their damn lives. They didn't have a philosophy, right? We're applying a philosophy to what they did retroactively. And if we look at the keeper of the rhetoric, it's Sandra Good. She has rhetoric. Other people have action. Other people acted. Other people were directed. I feel Susan was directed because she wanted to act. She owed Charlie. She owed everybody. Mm-hmm. She wanted to act. Yep. She brought all this shit on herself. Well, guess what? Charlie didn't want that broad coming back. Not now, not ever. Fucking beat it. Pardon my French, people.
Now, something that came up, that this is why I wanted to hit you. Give me a gavel bang.
Mercy.
I had to bring this up to you
Please.
Because here in volume 91, Nancy brings up, where was Charlie on the night of August 8th? He goes out to Devil's Canyon. He's getting a fitting for the, please explain it.
Well, as James Dawson was the first person to relate this to me, it all came, of course, from the great Deb Silva. The easiest way to find it now, of course, we're going to go back and talk about our dear friend, Mr. Bo Emerson. It's yellowdrive.com. His YouTube channel is just incredible. You can listen to the audio archives and the different things. But we go through these transcripts on his archive of the transcripts there at yellowdrive.com. Don't forget to like and to subscribe to him as well as us. Please, please, please do that. But what we find is, and again, why I like Al Springer, not a savory guy. People on the ranch didn't care for him. He said he saw 7 or 8 very underage girls up at Devil's Canyon, which, as we have established, was a short distance above Barker Ranch. Spawn Ranch. Look at me. I'm trying to read it.
No, you're good.
Look at me. I did the movie jump from Bullet, where they jump across the city from Potrero Hill to Fisherman's Wharf. Thank you for that logic. But we find that what he's saying is these things, they actually happened. And what it was is that they were going to get out there and get this thing done. So Charlie doesn't want to be a part of it. He's got potentially Stephanie Schramm, these different girls that are in the court transcripts, which I tend to believe. You know, people can argue it till the cows come home, but I think Stephanie and these other girls, as Al Springer said, because he was up there that night, he said that there was between 7 and 8 girls up there, potentially over a dozen at any one time, residing up in Devil's Canyon,
which is one of their little hideouts in case the heat comes down on Spawn Ranch. It's a nice little auxiliary location.
There was a waterfall.
Yeah.
There was a lot of nice things going on. That's where the alleged threats to the LA County fire happened and all these different things, because people were starting to have activities up there. They were doing some wanton things like just dumping stolen vehicles and doing different things that were, again, childish. You don't really think about these people as master criminals, but what was happening was, in the court transcripts, Charles Manson's big alibi for that night was that he was being fitted by Nancy Pittman, as we find in this penalty phase, chapter 91, for these leather breeches that he was having made, because he wanted to have a really nice set of leather bug out gear made for him. He had a head to toe outfit made. A lot of people have always wondered about these, because Lynette Fromey said in the Oxygen documentary, if you'll go back and watch that thing, it's some really interesting content, even though they really did Sister Sandra Good terribly on that one. That was a really rough edit on her. If anyone is interested in the transcript of her the full one, interview, get at me. It's about a 50-pager. It's incredible. Sandra Good says some just wonderful things. But the point being is, Lynette Fromey says, we were gathering leather cloth making equipment. We were building our last outfits. We were getting ready to have our last clothes made out of leather so that we could move into the desert. So they were feeling very final about their connection with society. So a lot of that was going to be based on these leather clothes that they were making,
which are very different than the buckskins. This was a high quality, you can
tailored, nicely made, but also much, as you say, buckskins that we think of that were very popular at that time, usually made with what's called a baseball stitch. Very simple, very rudimentary. They had them in Cub Scout manuals, how to make them. It was very Davy Crockett. You're going to have a coonskin cap and these fringe tops. And that was a very popular article. And the one that we always see Charlie photographed in was not the articles we're talking about. So when I would see these films and documents and be wondered about, go ahead.
This on the cover of Chaos, this is the day that he's being transferred into the custody from Inyo County into LA County jurisdiction, and he's about to appear in court. He's wearing the full buckskin outfit, the moccasins. This is not what we're talking about that Nancy is working on.
It's a more refined piece. So the confusion is, and the reason why I brought it up, this is the most popular book currently. It's taking off where Helter Skelter left off, and we'll get into the narrative about that. It's such an iconic and recognizable outfit that they used it in the tiniest way, and you know exactly who it is. And that being said, it really made that be the accepted truth of what he was wearing and what was being made for him. And that's where the mistake has commonly been made, is that what Nancy Pittman is talking about couldn't be the same thing as what he was arrested in. But that is often the assumption, because she wasn't done with the article, because he was arrested shortly thereafter. They were taken into custody roughly 2 months later in the desert. So they're up at Barker Ranch, busy being arrested. Nancy Pittman, according to other documents, which I put pieced together, was working on apparently a head to toe outfit for one Charles Manson made out of not buckskin, which is an uncomfortable, low grade form of hide. It's a very mountain man, rough arrangement. What she was talking about is making this very refined, beautiful piece fit for a prince because they loved him. They're not going to make him some basic thing. There's other people. Al Springer again. These other people talk about the girls look to them grubby, ill-dressed, underdressed, not dressed. Charles, always in finery, often leather, finery.
To me, this outfit speaks more to motorcycle culture. I don't know. Like to me, it seems like something that you would wear that would protect you if you ever laid a bike down. This is thick leather.
I think you're right. And I think it was going, if they weren't physically riding motorcycles, they were going that direction because the first thing you do is you need trucks because you need to move stuff. Well, then they get into the dune buggies. So then they're using the trucks for fuel vessels. They're still finding massive fuel vessels out in Death Valley. Charlie had a few 220-gallon. They're called belly bomber fuel tanks because they would put them on the bellies of bomber aircrafts as auxiliary fuel tanks. And you could purchase them from surplus stores, which Charlie did a lot of business with over the years, eventually culminating, of course, in the 1971 Hawthorne shootout at the Army Navy store, which is exactly one of these types of stores. So there was a lot of fuel going on. So they'd have these trucks. Then you're getting into the dune buggies. Well, then next is motorcycles. Well, they would have had a greater group of motorcycle riders, I believe, had they had the time. Had there been less Al Springers, more Danny DeCarlos, more Slave Louis, and people like that, it would have been more of a community because there were some people. It wasn't that Charlie was going to control these people. It's that Charlie had a situation of love. Like, hey, man, if I'm going to kill you, if I am going to end your life in the biblical sense, as they say in that previous term, we are going to do it out of love, with love. We're not going to hate you and then end your life. We are going to care enough about you that this is how this is going to go. And we're going to do it in a loving way. That is very hard to fathom and to take in. But if you look at that frame of mind and what that would mean to women who would say that, the kind of company they are, the kind of just limitless love they have. You're a newer person. They're scanning you. They're looking at you from top to bottom. That's not a bad thing.
Years ago, I read a book called The Starfish and the Spider.
Oh,
It's about decentralization and systems that don't necessarily work from the top down.
absolutely.
Right. And it made me think quite a bit about the family because according to the media, it's often presented that Charlie is the leader. He's the cult leader and all that. But I see the family much more decentralized.
Absolutely.
It's also very similar. It's brought up in that book about Geronimo, the great Native American,
who perished in they tried to hold out in Chiricahua Hills.
And the way that most tribes back in those days worked is you had a chief, right? And the chief would send out war parties, but not in Geronimo's tribe's case. They were a nomadic people and they did not have a chief. And when it was time for them to fight a fight, they all as individual men decided whether they're going to take up arms or not. So Geronimo said, I'm going. He didn't tell people you're going with me. He said, I'm going. And guys would say, you know what? If he's going, I'm going. And I think of it very similar with Charlie. He didn't need to tell people what to do. Their love that they had for him and the love that he gave back to them was enough to motivate them to do certain things.
Absolutely. And that is the core of this whole Manson family we talk about. You, as our viewer, if you're going to understand this, you really need to turn these things over in your heart, not just look at these books, not just think about the case, think about community in general. We're thinking about it in these times as well, but the love, the extreme and true love that these people, I know in my heart because of my contact with them, is very real. It's incredibly addictive. It is such a pure substance. The feelings of someone like a Lynn Fromey who would walk herself into the penitentiary for the rest of her life over these feelings. What does she say? There's no anger towards the president. There's no nothing. I love you. I love the world. I love the Redwoods. I love Charlie. How does that make any sense? Well, that's what you have to figure out, because until you can cross that bridge with us, the logic may fail. And for that, Twilighters, I'm sorry that my language is not more powerful to just be able to have you experience my feelings. But having been around this case so long, that has been my transformation, that it went from being something of fascination and excitement and history to something that is very personal and reflective, that if you don't change as a person taking these things in, I think you're a very calloused person. I think it's sad that you're not taking these experiences and the loss of life and the tragic things that did happen within the context of these pictures, the love, okay, the good thing that's coming out of this is just wasted and tainted, and those poor people and all that suffering were for nothing. And I'm not saying any of that was justified in any way, shape, or form, or that I personally would advocate acting in that way. I can't get behind any of that. But the love of somebody like a Sandra Good or a Lynn Fromey is
I'm glad. I love it.
thing.
I think it's great you brought it up, because you're right. This right here is love as the motivator. These two right here, this is fear as a motivator.
Fear and hate.
Both of these things are powerful motivators.
Both of them.
Right.
And I think, hey man, there's different elements, because I think certain people were afraid. And I think some of this is true. I think a Tex Watson was a very fearful man. I've heard so much from survivors who spent time with him that he was a independent operator who had his own interests for about a year and a half in California. He hadn't had any contact with his mother, who had browbeaten him and his father and had directed his every movement. He had ingested drugs, as I've seen people do from that very part of the country who also moved to Hollywood years later. You want to wash that away from your mind. You want to see the beach. You want to be a different person. You don't want to be a rube who wore weird track pants and ran around in a circle with other guys. You're trying to be this other person. And I am told that Charles Tex Watson was very much one of those type of people, that if it hadn't been Charles Manson, he'd have been right there at Jonestown.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'd have been, he was a Brooks Poston, but instead of being someone who was meek and mild, he had a penchant for drugs. He had a penchant for money. He wanted to be somebody. He felt he wanted to be recognized and have a certain element of fame, is what I was told. And I find that interesting because we don't hear a lot about that.
I think it eventually, had Tex not found this group of people, it would have caught up to him in another way.
Absolutely.
He would have burned somebody on a drug deal and got blasted or whatever.
Well, there's that too, but I think if not for Helter Skelter, if not for all the things he'd been involved in, there would have been another way that he became famous, according to the person I talked to, because he just had this weird little drive to be recognized and to be important.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother, you know what I mean, he had to prove himself to his mother. He had to have something to come back to.
He joined the frat when he was in college and got busted for a burglary, stealing typewriters. Yeah, just stupid like frat,
prank.
Yeah.
And that was his big bust. Well, as a person, I got busted in Texas. I was in the Tarrant County lockup. My grandparents came, very similar type people, showed up, and let me tell you something. I was chastened. I didn't feel good. They were good people. They loved me. They cared. It must have been like the Bruners, who we've talked about. There was Mary Bruner coming back at this point 3 or 4 times, according to her testimony in 91.
I think there's a big difference though, because you got in trouble for doing something that you wanted to do. Tex got in trouble doing stuff that
going along, being a follower. But the thing is, to have those big results, to go from stealing typewriters to the most infamous, and he was the instrument of it. And if we really look at Doris Tate, who I sometimes like to call Deborah Tate, jeez, man, dude, she was
fierce.
As a fellow Texan would say, he nailed his hide to the barn door, and he had the unmitigated temerity to have 4 children, to be famous, to have a Christian ministry, to go on the most famous of all network religious television shows of all time, which is in my culture that they experienced when I was with my grandparents. That's a huge honor. When you're on those Christian programs like that is beyond the Today Show.
TBN, CBN.
What was it? It was way before all that.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just an incredible, dude, they gave him a platform as a Christian hero.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to leave it at that. Just the continued outrage. Reading Helter Skelter, we're not 200 pages deep, Twilighters, and this thing blowing our hair back culturally every different direction. But then you have heroes. These women who were like, was it our fault that Bobby's in jail? Do we love Bobby so much we need to sacrifice lives for this person we love because our love knows no bounds? Like, is that a motive? Is that a thing we can talk about, that women will remove the lives of others because they believe their love is so large that is part of it? Twilighters, join us next episode as we try to address some of that. Thank you so much. As always, victims, survivors, and Twilighters, we love you very much. Keep liking, keep subscribing, keep tuning in. We dearly thank you.